Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music. And, as I also like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today we are in the great city of Washington, D.C. at National Cathedral for a very special conversation. I'm really looking forward to talking with Bill Barclay, who is here from out of town. Bill, thanks so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So I don't really know you. We just met. But when I interviewed Alexander Savronsky, he mentioned you because you had done some work about music of the spheres, which I think is a fascinating topic. But also, you know, my first cousin once removed Ellen Adair. And
from a long time ago in Boston, yeah.
Yeah. So just so grateful that you're able to take this time. You're a composer, director, musician. You're doing some really pretty fascinating stuff here at the National Cathedral, I know, in a couple of days. So just thanks very much for taking the time to talk about this.
Well, how fortuitous we were in the same city at the same time, so thank you.
Yeah, it really worked out. So maybe talk a little bit about what you do now, but also when did music come into your life? Where are you from? Were your parents musical? Did you start playing violin when you were 2, or did just kind of what was your musical trajectory to get where you are now?
At the moment, I'm director of music at Shakespeare's Globe in London.
Cool.
And I've been there for 7 years. I'm an American transplant to the city. And before then, I was sort of leading a double life as a musician and an actor. And I was always told that those two things were sort of incompatible, that I would have to choose one. And I always avoided choosing. And then finally ended up in this position where my theatrical skills and my musical techniques seemed to want to belong together. So I'm sort of desperately trying to hold on to this dual identity as a musician and as a thespian, and so far, so good. In terms of how I got there, unlike Alex, and I don't know what Ellen's childhood was like, but I know a little bit about Alex. I wasn't taken to a musical instrument when I was very young. I avoided practicing, and I avoided doing the hard work until as late as I possibly could. I was a space shot. I took piano lessons and didn't practice. I sang in folk groups in church with my dad. That was the origin of my musical love, was through ministry, really, singing in church. And then it was through the the social bonds of choirs and orchestras in my middle school and high school years that gave me a love of music. So I think music has always been a social activity for me. And that's probably why my work as a musician now is in the theater, because it's always about serving some sort of larger function than just pure absolute music or concert music. Absolute music is a term that classical musicians used to use for music that has no program notes. So a string quartet, an unnamed string quartet, an unnamed symphony, that's absolute music. It's always interested me less than music that serves a story or serves an occasion or serves a more discrete purpose.
Yeah, very interesting. So what were the instruments that you started playing, and what do you play now?
I played bass in jazz combos. I played trombone in high school orchestra. I played the double bass in orchestras, and then I shifted towards folk instruments. My brother's a guitarist. I still play guitar and banjo and mandolin. I love
rock and roll bands.
Yeah, rock and bluegrass, and I love all that. But I really feel like I'm an omnivore musically. I love it all, and I've never specialized. I've never done those 10 years where I spent 6 hours playing the violin in a practice room. That never appealed to me, nor did I ever succeed at that kind of unilateral focus. So in one sense, my strength is that I know a little bit about a lot of things, but that's also my insecurity, in that I'm a lateral lover of music and the arts, and I have a sort of horizontal specialty rather than a vertical, deep specialty. More fox than hedgehog, I suppose you could say.
Yeah. Well, I just have such respect for people who really, have grabbed a hold of music, or music has grabbed a hold of them, and they can just sit down and play all kinds of different instruments. I mean, it's hard. I'm picking up guitar, age 65, and it's hard, but it's just so worthwhile in so many ways to me, So, so now you're out and professional. You've kind of combined the music and the acting, but you're also composing, directing things. And maybe we'll just get right into the video that I saw on your website, Shakespeare and Music of the Spheres. I just find all this fascinating. I don't know what I know. I don't know what I don't know. But how did you kind of get into that sort of? What were you looking for? What attracted you to, I guess, more of a holistic perspective about music? Is that what you would say?
Sure. Well, my base coat for everything that I do is always Shakespeare. For some strange reason, he's followed me everywhere I've gone in my life. Various Shakespeare companies, opportunities to do the plays. I had a great teacher in high school, and I fell in love with Shakespeare very early. My dad was a director, and it's always fascinated me. As a musician doing lots of Shakespeare, I just ended up being the person who would make music for the plays. And so I developed this outgrowth of fascination and interest for what music does in the plays. And I know that Alex shared with you a little bit about his experience doing that.
Yeah.
And it's very fascinating. And that led me to a wider and deeper curiosity about the Elizabethan world picture, what they believed at the time, and why, when a reference is made to the music of the spheres in A Midsummer Night's Dream, what information was he playing on for the consciousness of his age? What did they think was actually happening? What did they think music's role actually was, and what was music doing to them? And the more I researched it, the more I just discovered that there was an uncannily large, deep, and vast field of forgotten information about the pre-Enlightenment view of science. Now, there's a lot of hullabaloo in this as well. I mean, there's astrology in here, there's alchemy. I mean, there's a lot of what modern people would call fake science in this age. There's Dr. D who would profess to do a technique called scrying, right, which is predicting the future from crystal balls. And I mean, there's so much stuff there that you sort of look past as being hack science now.
Yeah, my brother John Glassy wrote a book about a Jesuit named Anastasius Kircher, who was sort of one of these polymaths who came out of that late 1500s, and he was a kook.
Yeah.
But this is what they were looking at and believing was going on. But there are some truths there.
There's a lot of truth there, and there's some discoveries, mainly Kepler's harmonic law, that I realized through research was a completely neglected alleyway into a modern appreciation of music that was just left on the cutting room floor by the Enlightenment. And there are various reasons why it was, but perhaps I should explain the sort of nugget of what he gave us. So, for various reasons, we know Kepler because he sort of popularized the ellipse as opposed to the circle as the orbital path of planets. And that was sort of his major gift to us, was the three planetary laws that describe the mechanics of the ellipse. He inherited this from his mentor, Tycho Brahe, who died and gave him sort of a treasure trove of measurements. So we have to credit Tycho as well. Mm-hmm. Kepler was in a state. His mother was being tried as a witch. He had all kinds of horrible life circumstances that sort of enforced him to try every numerical possibility that he could come up with to prove why the ellipse was a more sacred geometry than the circle.
And the circle, though, from your video, I know a little bit that the church thought the circle, hey, that's like God's.
It's the perfect shape.
Yeah.
So why? So you have a bunch of ellipses instead of circles. Well, I think Kepler was afraid that he would get burnt at the stake if he tried to disrupt the church's pure sense of the way the cosmos worked. So he threw the kitchen sink at these numbers that he inherited from Tycho Brahe to come up with some sort of explanation for why the ellipse was actually a more perfect shape than the circle was. And a lot of his ideas didn't work. He tried putting the 12 platonic solids in the elliptical shapes, and that didn't work. And he tried loads of different things. But one of the things he tried was he measured the fastest and the slowest speeds of each planet, called the aphelion and the perihelion of each orbit. Again, these are only up to Saturn, because he didn't know Neptune and Pluto and Uranus then. Couldn't see them then. So he was going up to Saturn. And he took the fastest and the slowest speeds of each planet and divided them by the fastest and slowest speeds of the contiguous planets, assuming that a fast speed of Earth would have some relationship on the fastest and slowest speed of Mars, that Mars and Earth would have some relation because they were close to each other. He just inferred that they were affecting each other in some way because they were close. And he comes up with 74 measurements: fastest divided by the slowest speed of Earth, the fastest divided by the slowest speed of Venus, Venus fastest divided by Mercury slowest, all those things, 74 measurements. And 58 of them don't reduce to 13 over 46.5 or 72
some weird
over pi,
number.
some weird irrational number. They reduce to 1 over 2, 1 over 3, or 1 over 4. Now, what are 1 over 2, 1 over 3, or 1 over 4? What are those numbers? 1/2, 1/3, 1/4. They are the first three partials of the harmonic series. So that pitch is your fundamental, and the first overtone is that pitch, and that is 1/2 of the frequency of that pitch. And that's the first overtone, that's the second overtone, that's the perfect fifth, that's 1/3 of the fundamental.
Right.
And that's 1/4, 1/4, 1/3, right? You get the idea?
Yeah.
And then 1/5 is the major third. And that's it up there, 1/5. So if you do all of them together, you get 1, 3, 5, C, E, G, the major chord.
Whoa, and the planets.
So let's back this up a second. Think about what this means. The overtone series, the musical series, is the basis for our Western music. It's what we deem to be the major chord, is what we deem to be our happy, safe place. So lots of major tonal music, certainly for the 400 years since we have recorded written music in the Western world, has orbited around the tenets of the overtone series. That means to us psychologically that this is home, this is our happy place. 5 5 1 5 5 1 5 1 5 5 1 5 5 3 2 2, right? Every film score, every symphony in the 19th century all orbits around the major chord, feeling like home, and then the development section where more dissonance is introduced, and then coming back to home. So our sense of home is related to the simplest and most purest mathematical intervals that we can devise. There is no simpler, more basic fraction than 1/2. 1 over 2. You can't divide up number 1
pretty much,
in any more beautiful way. Same with 1 over 3, same with 1 over 4, same with 2 over 3, and same with 3 over 4, which are the differences between the harmonics. So what happens when Kepler reduces these planetary ratios and discovers that they reduce to the harmonic series, he has a eureka moment, and he realizes that the ellipse is actually coded for these most simple, beautiful mathematical intervals. Now, why would that be the case? And this is where it gets really interesting. So, famous astronomer Fred Hoyle calls these numbers astonishingly good. There are famous NASA astronomers who call this a coincidence, but they don't get any closer to understanding or explaining why the hell the planets would exist in a harmonious consonant relationship with the contiguous planets. There is no explanation in science that explains why this would be the case.
Right.
So this is where my research comes in, and I'm not the only one in this field. There's a fantastic anthropologist, musicologist named Joachim Ernst-Berendt, who wrote this book called Nada Brahma, The World is Sound.
Oh my God. We've got a little group of us from Victor Wooten's camp, Spirit Camp, because Michael, the teacher in the music lesson, I interviewed him and he talked about Nada Brahma. We're having at this moment like a Zoom video book group, chapter by chapter, trying to understand this stuff.
Oh my God.
It's mind blowing.
Yeah. This stuff is incredible. And it first came to me through that book. The idea that the concept of entrainment is potentially why these planets have evolved into consonants over time. And entrainment is a fishy scientific phenomenon because it's not one of those scientific phenomena that have an equation attached to it. Entrainment is more like a lowercase e. It's more like something that happens all over the place. Like, for example, if you ever have a group of people sing happy birthday, what happens? The first 5 seconds, everyone starts on a different pitch.
Yep.
And then typically, by the end of the song, they've all agreed on a way to end the song.
Right.
It happens every time. We do this every few days, really.
Yep.
That's entrainment. So everyone realizes how to entrain to each other. Another great example of entrainment is just when you put a beat on and people start dancing. People dance to the beat. People are entraining to the beat. We've evolved to sync up to each other. If there's a beat, if there's a steady pulse going, then we will connect to it. We'll connect to each other.
And the examples in your video, which I'd heard of, with the clocks.
Yeah, so in the 17th century, Christian Huygens demonstrated entrainment by hooking up 2 pendular clocks on a wall, setting them up to slightly different ticks. And he came back a couple days later, and the ticks were the same. And he had no idea why. So we know now that there is sonic energy, actually, because they're pendular clocks, it's really kinetic energy. So the kinetic energy travels through the wall and affects the other pendulum, so that over the course of several hours or days, they will form a stable consonant harmonic relationship with each other. This has been proven several times. We know that there's kinetic energy through the wall. We also know that there's sonic energy. In other words, as the pendulums move space in the air and as the sound, the vibration of their movement can affect through the air another vibrating body. And this is entrainment. And this happens in loads of other places across science. I'll give you one of my more favorite examples, because brainwave entrainment is quite a big outgrowth of science now. So here's an example of brainwave entrainment. So a lot of people get sort of grouchy under fluorescent lights. A lot of people don't like fluorescent lighting. Fluorescent lights oscillate at 60 times per second, which is the same as your delta brainwaves oscillate at 60 times per second. And delta brainwaves are the brainwaves you go into right before you fall asleep and right when you wake up in the morning. It's the brainwave that gives you a little tear sometimes. Sometimes when your eye tears, when you're really tired. It's your brain going into its delta mode. Now, if you're a person who gets grouchy when you're tired, then fluorescent lights actually, in a Pavlovian sense, can trigger the grouchiness you get when you're exhausted. And so people who are like that, then fluorescent lighting can actually make them agitated and quite unsettled. And that's a case of brainwave entrainment. The lights are flickering at 60 times per second. They go through your eyes. Your brain realizes and entrains or remembers its setting at 60 pulses per second. And it starts to get tired and are grouchy. I mean, that's brainwave entrainment. It's happening to our bodies all the time.
I mean, we're being affected by vibrations all the time. We are vibrations, and I guess that's also in music, the consonance, the dissonance. I mean, there's different vibrations, the way we're perceiving them.
There's so many ways to look at this.
Yeah.
You know, there's vibrational signatures of our mitochondria, obviously of our human hearing range, of our heartbeat. Our heartbeat has a pulse that can entrain to other people's heartbeat. I mean, our breathing patterns can train to other people's breathing. I mean, we have so many frequencies going on in our body all the time, and that's to say nothing of the electromagnetic and radioactive frequencies that are being emitted by our cell phones and by cell towers and by airplanes flying overhead. You're right, this is a Pandora's box. When you think about matter as vibration, it really is the sort of tabula rasa that allows everything to be connected to everything else and allows us to talk about music in a much more pliable and open way than just going to a concert hall or sticking on Spotify. Suddenly music is the way in which is the sort of metaphor of all of us sounding together and what it means when we harmonize and are in dissonance with each other. And that's kind of that's the platform that my research takes.
It's so cool. So from Kepler's work of basically finding that the paths of the planets were similar to the harmonic, the octaves and the fifths and all that, I guess the planets also make sounds too. They must. I mean, what else did Kepler take from it, or what else do you take from that? Just sort of the essential aspect of music. I mean, the fundamentals of music and vibration to what we are.
Well, he inherited from Plato the idea that there was a siren sitting on each planet, and each siren was singing a pitch of constancy throughout all of history. Now, Aristotle had worries about that. He thought it was sort of pragmatically difficult or impossible, which I think is hysterical. Now, we know now that they don't make a sound as such, because without any matter in the fabric of space, that sound itself, as we know it, doesn't travel. But that doesn't mean that there aren't vibrations that can reach us in another way. And I think you've got to look at these planetary harmonies in terms of Einsteinian space-time, and the fact that their one cycle, 127, 29-year cycle of Jupiter, does have a vibration, does have a sort of vibrational field, and in a periodic way, it has a periodicity, and that periodic function affects the periodic function of our entire solar system. And when you look at all the matter in our solar system orbiting over millennia, when you look at it that way, it's no longer a surprise that the bodies in our solar system are finding ways to discover consonant, stable relationships with each other over time. Now, granted, some comet might come in and blast, Ion or Europa or one of the moons of Jupiter or Jupiter itself. Although it's so big and full of gas, it wouldn't happen. But things can happen to disjoint the system and create more instability. And Ernst Berendt is great in the book about talking about entropy and how entropy and chaos theory really led the way for the last 30 years of the 20th century in terms of trying to anarchically tell us that there is no order and there is no reason to be optimistic that everything's going to work out in the end. But entrainment tells us something different. And I don't want to overstate what it tells us, because it's not telling us that we're all headed towards being consonant bodies forever. What it's saying is that over time, things, objects, the universe, everything wants to find a stable relationship. Everything that's periodic, everything that's regular, seeks stability with other things that are regular. There's loads of other things that are irregular. Okay, I clap my hand, that's an irregular vibration. Okay, it comes up on a digital waveform like a big squiggle on a digital audio editor. But a pitch, a hum, is regular. And the Earth goes around the sun once every 365 days. That's a regular vibration, okay? So a regular vibration like that will affect a regular vibration of Venus, will affect a regular vibration of Mars, will affect less a regular vibration of Jupiter, but Jupiter's will affect the regular vibration of Saturn. So that if we were to travel millions of years in the future, would I expect that 58 number to climb towards the 74? I would. I would expect over time more consonance among regular constituents than what it is now. And just to answer your question, if I then extrapolate what that means towards our relationship with music, I think it's just the awareness that we are naturally seeking stability. The things that are stable in our bodies, our health, our breath, our heartbeat, the vibration states, the health of our consciousness, of our mind, all of these things seek stability. And instability is, of course, a necessary ingredient in life. But music, I think people's preoccupation with tonal music explains that people do reach for music to entrain certain pleasant emotional states. And I think that's really the rub. Just to go on another tangent for a second, but after Schoenberg in the Second Viennese School in the 30s and 40s, Schoenberg, Berg, and Webern introduced atonality, introduced serialism into the bloodstream of Western classical music. And suddenly, all the music colleges all over Europe and the United States for about 50 years suddenly deemed serialism, atonality, to be the future of new music, the future of classical music. Well, look how that happened. Do you turn on Berg's Lulu in the shower when you get up in the morning? I do sometimes, but I love it. But and I'm not dissing that music. That music is brilliant. But I feel like tonality, the beauty of writing in tonal language that people can understand and digest on a first listen, was debased in the face of sort of a quote-unquote smarter or more modern way of making music. And if you look at the living composers who are writing instrumental music today, who are they? You know, it's people writing tonal music. I mean, Philip Glass is still popular. Max Richter, you know, hugely popular. And there are lots of composers writing opera today that's vaguely non-tonal, and that's fine. And a lot of people love it and listen to it, and I listen to it and love parts of it too. But there is no doubting the fact that a lot of that really complicated music veered off the path of mainstream music and is now slightly enclaved by vague sort of musical intelligentsia who understand the lexicon, can appreciate it, and can derive meaning from it. But that enclave is separate from the mainstream listenership of music today, which generally speaking responds to entrained tonal and rhythmic behavior. I mean, half of music people listen to now starts like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the rest is in hip hop and electronic dance music, and world music is based around a tonal vocabulary that feels like familiar things, and I think there's no denying the fact that people still want that.
Yeah, they do want the songs that are in a familiar sort of chords. You know, the blues.
Yeah.
You know, the 1-4-5. There you go. I mean, you could do that all day long, sort of. Just being a little bit random, but one thing I remember you talked about in the video was I guess it's the moons of Jupiter, and how they sort of entrained into a real, I don't know, just pattern. Yeah,
so, I mean, it's somewhat hysterically, even though astronomers can't back up the claim that there's some sort of entrained behavior on the planets, they still call things like this orbital resonance, which is hysterical. It just shows, in my mind, the foibles of the limits of what they're willing to explain. Because it is exactly what's happening. The moons of Jupiter are resonating with each other. Io, Europa, and Ganymede are in a completely stable relationship with each other. Io, if you think about it as that one, in other words, if you think about it as 1/1, for comparison, Europa goes around exactly twice as fast, and Ganymede goes around Jupiter exactly 4 times as fast. They're in a 1-2-4 consonance with each other. It's exact. It's not slightly off or approximately that. They've locked into this tonal, harmonic overtone series. And again, I would describe it in terms of music, but music is an example of the consonants just as much as the planets are. It doesn't go back to music. It goes back to beauty. It goes back to stability and simplicity. Music is describing that simplicity and beauty that stable bodies are finding over time. It's not that the moons of Jupiter are making music. It's that music is what that inclination to order sounds like.
So also in the Nada Brahma book, which on the front of the book it says, Nada Brahma, the world is sound. And I was just getting into this and went to an Indian restaurant and asked some of the people there, I said, so what does this say to you? How would you interpret Nada Brahma? And Brahma, I guess, is the main god of a lot of gods, but all the gods are really part of the same god. I mean, I don't know. But they said they would sort of interpret Nada Brahma as everything in the universe came from music. Now, does that sound about right to you? And it's pretty profound if it is. I mean, if the Big Bang, you know, first there was the word, was some kind of a vibration, a sound or something that kind of spun us all out like these, you know, little sand and salt patterns on a tone generator that, you know, it's like that's kind of the source or something. I mean, what do you think about that?
All you have to look at is the first sentence of each major religion or culture's creation myth on this planet starts with a noise. So the first Genesis doesn't begin with, you know, the first there was light. You know, everything begins with, like, even in science, they call it the Big Bang. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, they don't call it the first instance of inflationary cosmology. They don't. They like to think about it as a noise. And, you know, when you talk about prehistory, I think you're reading the tea leaves of everyone's collective intuition. And if you look at all the intuitions from the mystics and the scientists and the hacks and the fanatics and the tribes and the governments, when you dig even just a little bit, you find that sound. People feel like it started with sound, and that's all we have to go on, really, because we don't really have much else. But I think it's the key to understanding that the focus should be the focus of healing ourselves, and the focus of what to do in our modern world today should still be with our vibrational state. I think that is the key, that we think about things starting with sound. We think about how much everyone loves music. There's no human being on the planet that doesn't love music. You try to name someone. Right. There's no human culture that we know of that has ever lacked music. Music is a constant. People love it. Anyone who's not a musician can tell you why they like the music that they like. And I think what Ernst Berendt is pointing to is the new consciousness, which is trying to raise our vibrational energies towards being more compassionate, more aware, more kind, more empathetic to the rest of the world, more appreciating and tolerant of differences, above difference, above our thinking, and into a felt oneness with each other and with the planet. And without sort of getting too new age on anyone, all of that is about raising your vibrational frequency and using the power of sound and music to basically heal your mind, heal your consciousness, and grow and evolve as a species.
Which we can, it works individually from the standpoint of, you get in the car and you're upset and you turn on the music and you feel better. But so why not collectively on a whole, population of the world basis, human society, or even, other living and non-living things.
It's so powerful. And repressive governments, one of the first things they do is they ban certain kinds of music and they ban certain kind of folk songs. And I mean, people are aware and cognizant of music's power. It's perhaps possible that everyone has an obligation to just fill their lives and each other's lives with as much music that they love as possible.
Yeah. A couple other things I want to ask about, and then you may have some other comments. But so you were talking about the Elizabethan period, and that they had, certain things that they believed in, and some things that we lost. What were those things that they had before we got into the industrial era and all that, in Shakespeare's time, that maybe Shakespeare knew about, or that the people then knew about, that we kind of lost, but that we could get back?
That's a really good question. My favorite is the concept of the microcosm and the macrocosm. So they believed in what's called the great chain of being, which is an idea that was populated by Robert Flood, who was another one of those polymath scientists of the late Elizabethan age. The idea is that the man has the whole universe inside him, and that if you think about it as like a Leonardo da Vinci drawing, that in the lower half of the body would be our base instincts, and the upper half of our body would be our highest instincts. So that as we get towards into our head, we are closer to God and we are closer to our virtue. And as we get deeper in our body, we are more in touch with our beastlier parts, and we're more in touch with the ground. But that all of the elements and all the humors of the universe were inside our body. And that human beings were structured on a vertical order that was analogous to the order of the beasts and animals, of birds, of minerals, of trees and plants, and music. So that the king was the fundamental ta. So that's the fundamental pitch, which is the father of the family, the oak tree, the lion, gold, right? Mm-hmm. And that the octave, which is the first partial, the first harmonic, that is the queen, the tiger, the wife, silver. You follow me?
Yeah.
And that's the second overtone, would be, the head, the third most down the line. And so that each group and ordering of the universe, minerals or humors or plants or animals or a domestic relationship, was in a musical consonance was in a value system that was related to the dominance of certain intervals in the musical scale. And so they believed that all of these chains were linked up. And when you put all these chains together, that is the great chain of being. And that inside all of these chains, if you mix it all together, every human being has a mix of all those virtues and all those polarities and all those scales together. Hysterically, the thing that was sort of problematic is the question of whether women had souls, which they weren't quite sure if women had souls, right? As you get Beatrice saying, "As sure as I have a soul and much ado about nothing," because of course they had soul, And there's lots of silly stuff in there too. But one of the things I really like about the micro and the macrocosm is that I think it's prescient about modern science, because we look at our bodies and we know that we have a mixture of all of the sort of table, all the sort of the whole periodic table of elements practically is in our body, and that we have a mix of all these potentials and we have a mix of all these vibrations. So I think it's a fascinating bit of foreshadowing of the modern world, but there's also a mysterious sense of the interconnectedness of everyone and of the sort of governmental platonic balance of civic life that I think is important in the Elizabethan world picture. And I think we lost a little bit of the natural beauty of that when we let chaos theory and entropy and anarchism, but atheism to dominate the discourse around science. I think we lose some of the mystery, we lose some of the beauty, but what we also lose is the gender normativeness of that period, which we don't need anymore. We don't need to be reminded that for hundreds of years that men were more important than women. So there's important things to dispense with about that. The class system in Britain, there are hierarchies of that are important to dismantle. But there's also a mystery and a beauty about the interconnectedness of things that I think we've thrown out with the bathwater as well.
Yeah, a little more intuitive view of the world and who we are.
Yeah,
I guess. Okay, another random question, if you don't mind. So I hurt my knee. I missed the last step, tore my quadriceps tendon, and when we talk about music healing us, I have a friend who has a body tambura, which is sort of a Indian drone instrument that they put over the bodies of people in India when they were in hospice to help alleviate pain.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I don't know, I'm actually trying to find one, but she came over and she put her body tambura on my leg. And I don't know if it helped too much, but I'm using tuning forks to try to...
Oh, wow.
I don't know anything about it, but it has to make some sense to get some of those things that are a little bit out of whack. What do you feel or think about, vibrational healing? Does that spark any thoughts for you?
Lots of different parts of our bodies have acoustic signatures. Sound, sort of acoustical healing, sound in science is starting to become a more integral part of modern medicine. In terms of replacing healing muscles and tendons and things, I don't really know, although I'm sure that there are more beneficial frequencies to be playing around damaged tissue than others. But what's starting to become a very exciting branch of accepted science is that certain cancers have acoustic signatures. And if you play the opposite frequency to something, it can neutralize it. I'll explain what I mean. Noise-canceling headphones.
Yeah.
Okay, so a waveform does have its negative image, like a photograph does. And the way noise-canceling headphones work is there's actually a microphone on the outside of your headphones that receives the sound waves of your environment, and then will actually input into your ears the opposite frequency of what it's picking up, thereby neutralizing much of the sound. Mm-hmm. That's the whole science behind noise cancellation. It reads it, it inverses it, it sends at the same amplitude the opposite frequency, and they cancel each other out. So there are branches of science that are doing this with things in the body that are unwanted, that have an acoustic signature, like certain kinds of lesions. You can literally fire at them, non-invasively, of course, the opposite frequency, and you can diminish the size of that lesion. That is
Wow.
happening. That is science. It seems like magic, but of course it's there. I think repairing tissue and bone is a lot of a harder lift. But there are consonant frequencies that do help the body marshal white blood cells. And there are consonant frequencies that allow the body to relax, that allow inflammation to go down. And I'm sure that there are places online that can already tell you what you can sort of do. And of course, things like Reiki helps as well, and
Right.
meditation help as well. But so does the power of prayer to a lot of people too. So
Right.
you start to get into a place where science is really unable to measure the effects these things are having. And I think their inability to measure their effectiveness should not dissuade us from believing that any of these things have any benefit.
Yeah. So I also read a little bit about rhythmic healing, and I suppose to the extent any of this makes any sense, because you talked about in the video something that they had talked about down at Victor's camp too, that tone is just, or rhythm is slowed down tone. So I suppose rhythm could also have a healing effect, and I suppose it does on us. And we're driving down the road in our car, and you hear that beat.
You have to think about rhythm and pitch as the same thing. And I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but the easiest way to understand it is if you think about a lawnmower starting up. You know, when you first start an engine, you get to, right?
Right.
You hear that pitch starting to create. So our human ears have a range of 20 to 20,000 hertz. 1 hertz rather, is 1 pulse per second. But you get 20 to 20,000 hertz. So when any repeating frequency, if I clap my hands, you hear this as a rhythm. If I could clap my hands 20 times per second, right, way faster than I could demonstrate, then you would cease to hear that as me clapping my hands, and you would start to hear that as a very, very low hum. 20 times per second, the lowest pitch we can discern. Anything lower than 20 hertz per second, we hear it as a flutter. So that's why you get the... You can hear the rhythm start to take the form of pitch. Dogs, lots of animals have a higher hearing range than we do. You know, obviously into ultrasonar range, we can't hear higher than 20,000 hertz per second. As we get older, that 20,000 gets lower and lower and lower and lower. The hearing range starts to diminish. Our appreciation for the overtone series, which is often up in the stratosphere, starts to diminish. All those things are true. But when you drop pitch down below 20, you get beats, you get rhythm. When you drop it lower than a year, you can start to get the orbital frequencies of planets, you know, in our solar system. And those are rhythms just as much as the beats we listen to are rhythms. They are literally analogous to each other. They're on the same gamut. It's just that in a sort of kind of Schopenhaueric kind of way, we have to realize that our 5 senses are finite, and that what we can appreciate in our 5 senses is not even a metaphor for everything else. It's just one function, one little section of the range that everything else is operating in all the time.
Well, all this is just so fascinating. I guess maybe the last thing I'll ask, unless we end up on some other tangents, or if you have something else you want to say, is, you know, we've got our little Planetary Gig Society here, and trying to see what we can do about helping to overcome some of the problems we have. How can we bring peace through music? How can we, you know, have better world, more peaceful world? Music just seems so powerful, so much of what we are, that I think there must be things that we can do collectively to enhance our, you know, collective resonance similarities or something. You're so much more eloquent than me, but do you have thoughts about things that people, you said, you know, everybody should listen to as much music that you love as possible, but other thoughts about what people could do, musicians could do, just ideas to throw out there, anything about, you know, hey, we're only here for a short time. How do we make it as good as we can, knowing what we know?
Yeah, I mean, there are loads of things. I think people sharing music that they like is a really important thing that we should always continue to do. When you discover something that really chimes with you, send it to other people who you think it would chime with them. I think that's a really great way that we can go about sharing and passing on a lot of the good vibes that we experience in our life. This is a little weird tangent, but before Facebook, there was this thing called MySpace.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I think
I remember.
Friendster did this as well. Now, what you could do on that you can't do on social media is you could post music that you liked. Now, you can do that on Spotify, but I think it's interesting and quite detrimental to this conversation we're having. The fact that none of the major social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, the ones that people are using, none of them are music sharing services. MySpace was, strangely enough. You could virtue signal to the world that you liked Radiohead, or that, and granted, there was a lot of annoyance in that, but because it wasn't like you were posting music you created, although you could post music you created.
Yeah.
But the SoundClouds and the Spotify sharing and the Apple Music sharing that people use, they're not so much invested in the, hey, I've just listened to something really cool and I want you to know what it is. They're not so much passing on the currency and the bloodstream of music sharing. I think people should music share a lot more than they do. And the people that do should just widen their circle and appreciate when you found a gem that a lot of other people would like it too. That's the first thing. The second thing about professional musicians and what we're doing is I think, being at the Globe has taught me a lot about what role space has in the music we listen to. And too much of the gig economy is focused around playing the same music or similar music on tour in different spaces without necessarily building a consciousness over the moment and the space in which the music is made. And I think we can take a lot of tips from music of other cultures. Carnatic music, Hindustani classical music, they have a raga for different times of the day. They've literally got a song or a melody that's meant to entrain you to the sort of vibrational reality of that moment in your life, and to put you in touch with everything, to put you in touch with your soul, to put you in touch with each other. And because we don't have that relationship to music in the Western world, we do go out and we listen to bands, and I think bands and orchestras could do more to take a minute before they start to play and train us to the space that we're in. Allow us to sit in silence maybe a little bit longer. Maybe come out and talk to us about why they're doing what they're doing, why this space is special, why this acoustic will bring you in a closer communion with the music, why they've chosen this particular batch of music for this particular evening, why they want you to listen to this now. Just to curate the moment, the space, and the eventfulness that we take for granted when we listen to music, because I think that can provide connective tissue to the present moment, to our sense of presence as we're listening to music in a space. And I think we take that for granted. We bought the ticket, we show up at the Barbican, or we're at Madison Square Garden, hooray. But what is eventful about this moment of all of us in this room, specifically in this space, in this moment, together? We're about to entrain together. Why not make it slightly more ceremonial by just inviting us to be present in the consciousness that you are espousing in the music you've created?
Wow, that's really cool. Just being very intentional about the music and appreciative of the space and that we're all in there together. So, well, Bill, I tell you, I can't thank you enough for taking the time from your, getting ready for this gig you have coming up, pretty big gig here, and thanks so much for the time. I loved the video you did. I think the things that you're talking about, researching, all that. I hope you write that book or that movie, whatever, one of these days about this, and let us know whatever we can do to help it. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
All right. Bill Barclay, everybody. Thank you. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. we talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.